Good morning, everyone. Week number 3 in Japan. We're still in great shape here, having a great time. Today, Catharsis. Catharsis is a red tea. And the past 2 weeks have been red teas. So you have something now to kind of compare against. So we started with Omnipresent, which had osmanthus flowers in it. We went to Victory, which gave you this huge surprise of dates, of sweetness, of pininess. Oh yeah, by the way, there's a little smoke. And now we come home to traditional red tea. What do I mean? From Qimen County, Anhui Province. So we've talked about some of the Qimens that we have in the past, including Qimen Needle, Starburst, Luxuriant Bangs, bunch of teas which all come from this county. All outstanding teas. Catharsis is no exception. Great, outstanding tea. So, for being an outstanding tea, let's dial the clock back a minute, look at history. When did tea in Qimen County start to become famous? Now, this is a trick question because almost all of you who've been on the broadcast before are going to say, gosh, I kind of recall you said before the red tea became famous, starting in around 1875 or 1876. Didn't you say that before? But that wasn't the question I just asked, was it? The question I asked is, when did tea become famous in Qihun County? So green tea was famous in Qihun County all the way back in the Tang Dynasty. Tang, we remember, starts from about 618 and goes to about 960. And it became really famous in the Sung Dynasty, somewhere between the 1100s and 1368, something like that. So tea from this area has been famous for a long time, just like tea in the Wuyi Mountains has been famous for a long time. Remembering, of course, all tea pre-1368 was in green tea cakes. And it wasn't in these modalities, these different modalities of tea. So from Qimen County, they were already producing famous green tea. 1875 rolls along, and a former official from Fujian sets up shop in Anhui. Yu Gangcheng sets up shop and starts thinking about the process. We got to make a really fine red tea. And he already has training in the Fujian style of red tea. And he already knows that in Europe, there's this enormous appetite for red tea. So he starts working on, let's do real good red tea from Qimen County. And then another local official, surnamed Chung, starts to work on this same project, and the two of them become friends. And so they promoted the growth of Qimen style, Qimen County tea. So by 1915, this wins a gold prize at an international exposition. And it really becomes famous in Europe. And they want this stuff. They want this tea. And so the production goes through the roof. Farmers are happy. Local officials are happy. I don't know anybody who's not happy. They're drinking this stuff in Europe, and it's just fabulous. And that comes to a crashing change in 1940. So in 1939, you have the highest production of Qimen reds ever. And that level wasn't reached again until 1958. So let me think here. What happened in 19? Oh, World War II. And World War II came early to China. You do remember this. 1931, the Japanese invade Northeast China, and they said, oh, by the way, we're going to take the Northeast, but we'll stop up here. So the Chinese essentially said, okay, well, we don't like this, but we don't really have the power to truly fight it. And the Japanese have stopped there. But in 1937, the Japanese decided, you know what? Northeast was pretty good. Maybe we can get some more better if we go south. And so by 1937, they've crossed a famous bridge and headed towards Beijing. And by that time, everybody in China realized, ooh, we're going to get visitors. And we're going to get visitors probably pretty far to the south. And so that's why the Qimen production went into a tailspin. It didn't go into a tailspin right away because it took the Japanese a little while to get into Anhui Province. But once they got there, it came essentially to a stop. By the way, the Chinese already in 1936 had decided to send some of their technicians to as far to the south of China as they could go to look for other sources of tea, as well as to look for places where they could set up production facilities. And they ended up in Yunnan, Fengqing, Yunnan. But that's a whole different story. So 1939 rolls by, Japanese invade Anhui, totally control it. Europe is a mess because by that time, Germans are going everywhere. And everything in terms of importing and getting really nice Chinese products comes to a close. And farmers essentially have to leave the land. Their production comes to a close. So during World War II, China's just a mess because Japanese everywhere, not much production. World War II concludes. The civil war in China goes forward. And then when Mao's group comes to power, what happens is by 1948 in Anhui, they have control. And basically, at that time, 2/3 of the production area dormant. Nobody's farming. How can they? Complete chaos and confusion for a number of years. 1948, Mao's group starts to say, okay, we ought to see if we can't get more production here. So gradually, they reform the way tea is produced. And by 1958, they exceed by quite a bit the production level from 1939. So it took 18 plus years to get back up to that production level. Europeans are happy, yeah, producing our favorite tea again. And remembering in Britain in particular, they're using that as the good part of English breakfast, right? So anywhere from 5% to 8%, the really good stuff. And then you dump in 90+% of the Psalms. Psalms are bitter, not the good stuff, but it stretches the good stuff and it makes English breakfast relatively inexpensive and relatively accessible to everybody. Post 1957, tea production starts to slide. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. First off, the Soviet Union at that time starts to not be a customer anymore. And so that's one issue, because China and the Soviet Union start to not be such close friends. And by 1959, they're not friends at all. And therefore, the consumption that's going to the old Soviet Union, not going anymore. So that's lowering. Secondly, Chinese at that time were in difficult economic circumstances. So more production was diverted to other things. So continued decline in production. So when did things turn around again for the Qimen County area? And by the way, the Qimen County area can properly be called an offshoot of the Yellow Mountains. So it's very southern part of Anhui, but the Yellow Mountains run a long way, and it's not that far away. So the elevation there is anywhere from about 200 degrees above sea level all the way up to 5,100.
200 feet above sea level?
I'm sorry, thank you. 200 feet above sea level. 200 degrees above
Well,
sea
you're working
level.
with tea, temperature.
Temperature matters, yes, exactly. Thank you. Up to about 5,100 feet above sea level. And certain areas, so how big is Qimen County? It's about 2,200 square kilometers. So certain areas of that produced really, really good Qimen. Other areas produced not so good Qimen. And so as time passed, they started to find more uniformity. And scientists, agricultural scientists became involved. The peasants learned the techniques more skillfully how to produce. And so finally, by about 2003, you're starting to get improvement. But what is the level of output? Remember, I said it was 20,000 tons in 1958. So by 2003, they'd recovered to 800 tons. So they're still far away, but at least they're going in the right direction. So why am I going through this history? I don't want you to think that, oh, this great tea that we have in the shop was always great tea. Well, it actually was always great tea, but it was consistently being produced. It wasn't consistently being produced. And lots of historical factors played into that. But since 2003, there's been dramatic increase, and the best of this tea is recognized throughout the world. Yes.
Is that increase in production of red tea coincident with further governmental support and interest in supporting farmers and production?
Great question. So the question is there a relationship between government aid and support and encouragement and further production of tea? There absolutely is. So part of and where does this come from? It comes from, and this is a really good question because it teaches you something about how Chinese government works. When a famous person in the central government comes to your area and says, oh my God, this is good stuff, and he's quoted in the newspaper, all of a sudden, everybody says, oh my God, we didn't realize there was such good stuff here. And they start drinking it, and they start appreciating it. And even foreigners, oh, this famous official went down there and said, this stuff is good. I want this stuff too. And so, yes, there is a clear relationship. Usually, this growth is promoted by provincial authorities. But when you get national authorities involved, it's even more impressive because the national reach is so much greater. If you're in a national newspaper, that's different than being in a provincial newspaper, because the provincial newspaper is basically read in the province. National is read everywhere. So from 2003 onward, by 2006, there's this huge increase in output. And a lot of it had to do with the agricultural scientists giving the peasants a template on how to produce good tea. Now, you would say to yourself, wait a minute, didn't you say this area was producing pretty good tea all along since the beginning of the Tang Dynasty? The answer is yes. But good tea doesn't produce itself by itself. In other words, if you're not passing it down through the generations and you're undergoing chaos in the farms for historical reasons, then you lose some of that institutional knowledge, which you don't regain until somebody brings it back to you. And then once the government starts giving you incentives and teaches you, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, this is good, this is easy, this is good money. And that's what happened in this case. This tea is world renowned. Oh, there's one other factor. You know what? The other factor that interfered between 1958 and all the way up to about 2003 was that Indian and Sri Lankan red teas really blossomed. The production really went up. More people were drinking those. They became industrialized. You had more tea bag tea. But as you started to get less tea bag tea and more premium leaf tea, where can you return to? Where can you look? You can't look to India. India, all these years, it's an increasing production of tea bag tea. Sri Lanka is even worse, almost completely tea bag tea. What they do in Kenya is predominantly tea bag tea, not premium leaf. Once you start doing premium leaf, what happens to the cost? It goes through the roof. It's very inconvenient. You have to use your hands to pick. Oh, that takes a long time. And then at the top grades, so I'm talking about premium grade, first grade, second grade, and third grade, you're not using machines, or you're only using machines at the front end. You're doing all the manipulations by hand. That means you're handling everything by hand. That costs money. That costs real money. And so the result is, if the premium tea market isn't developing, if you don't have an international wonder like Sophie's Cup of Tea increasing that premium market, who's going to drink this stuff? As it turns out, the Chinese themselves are drinking it as it becomes more premium, as it becomes better tasting. And one of the things I should look back towards last week when I talked about victory, that the tea master reminded me, there's more people than I implied in our discussion last week who are drinking victory in China. Initially, I implied that there was almost nobody drinking victory. That's not true, because realistically, that tea has a moniker which is very famous in Chinese, Zhengshan Xiaozhong. From in the mountain, a small varietal. And in China, that term is used frequently, is well known, and it refers to victory and other small varietals from that famous area. So it's drunk more than I implied. The Qimen Reds are also drunk more than one might imagine, but less than green tea, less than oolong tea. but they certainly are still drunk in China. And our competition, our real competition for the premium grades, again, is not here, it's not Europe, it's China. The premium grades of all of these teas are consumed by the top levels of government, the top levels of tea aficionados. That's where these really famous teas are being consumed. And Catharsis is part of that. So, continuing the history a little bit, by the 2010s, the Qimen Reds are hugely famous all over the world. The premium Qimen Reds. And the price of those things is going through the roof because people realize this is really good. What else are they realizing? You know, pre-2000, everybody in the West, most people in Japan, and quite a few in China are publishing articles. What type of people? I should be more specific. Scientists. They're publishing articles and they're saying, you know what? Those catechins are really good. And so, you know, they're pumping up the green tea. Yeah, you drink that green tea, you get those catechins, and everything in your body is going to work real great. That's the indication. And you get then these blue zones, Okinawa, other places, and they're drinking green tea. And so everybody's doing the research. Yeah, this green tea is out of this world. Who's doing real good, legitimate scientific work on the red teas? Not as many scientists. So you have some scientists in India, because that's predominantly what they're growing. You don't have that many scientists in Sri Lanka doing it. The scientists who are doing it in Sri Lanka are doing it for other reasons. They're not looking to sell alleged nutritional benefits. They're looking to increase production. Yeah, we got to make these varietals so they're more automatically pest resistant, easier to harvest. They all grow at the same height. They're looking for industrialized improvements. They're not looking for, hey, you drink this stuff and you're going to live longer than Confucius's legacy. Yes.
So that's really interesting. That makes me think about craft tea production and in the red tea universe more generally. So both Qimen and Yunnan, though they're, you know, we're talking ancient tree in Yunnan, and we're talking different varietals and smaller leaf in Qimen, but for sometimes in different fields, in different areas, subject areas, sometimes government promotes craft, sometimes it promotes high volume. And so I'm curious about whether the government was the one that was sort of like saying, hey, we want to promote high, strong, well-crafted, super high-level reds in Qimen, as well as volume.
So it's a great question. The juxtaposition between high volume and craft tea, there is a juxtaposition because high volume indicates uniformity and it indicates machines. Craft indicates these things, hands. And you got to be using your hands to process stuff. So China actually, for a couple different reasons, did both. One is in the mountainous areas, there's no ability to do high production because the farms are small, 1/8 of an acre or less. So there's never going to be an ability to have high production machinery. So, hey, we better promote craft. And down in the plains, let's promote production. But even their promotion of production is different than Indian or Sri Lankan because so many of the farms are in the plains and they're looking to do machine harvesting with an end result of tea bags. So great question. So one more thing, and then I'm going to ask the tea master to come in. So on this historical plane, one more thing I got to mention. What does it mean when you say Kung Fu Chi Hu? Oh, that sounds like a style of fighting. Kung Fu Chi Hu, where you move like a tea leaf. Sorry to disappoint everybody. Kung Fu here means master craft. And Kung Fu refers to the premium grade, the first grade, the second grade, and the third grade, where they do all these extra handcrafted steps. Now, I know all of you are thirsty. The tea masters indicated to me that, gosh, you're talking a long time and making everybody really thirsty with dry history. I apologize. So it is my great pleasure to bring in the thirst quenching, I wonder if I can say that, I already did, tea master to go ahead and have you brew with her. Xiaobei.
Yes, thank you. Hey, everyone, good morning. How are you? Yeah. So we do new red tea, huh? It's also from Qimen County. So this famous tea, I forgot about drinking my tea early in the morning. I'm totally thirsty. You're right. So, okay, this tea, so this is really interesting. I like it in handcraft. So, yeah, it's famous. So, it is go to, that's the famous factory in China. So, this is really good. So, similar to John, talk to me.
Yes, they have the usual tableau here, 3 glasses to speed up the dissipation of steam. We're going to use 175-degree water to heat the glasses. We're going to dissipate the steam of 175-degree water, and then we will brew with it. Remember, you do this for 2 reasons. One reason is to make sure there's no residue on the glasses of anything that you don't want, like soap stains or any of that, because I know all your glasses are inherently clean. And the second reason is because at the end of the day, you want the glass that's receiving the tea leaves to be hot. And it can be hot anywhere from 175 to 200. And that heat, when you put the dry tea leaves in, brings out or wakes up the leaves. So she's going through the process here, dissipating the steam. Remember, we're using tea rhythm here, not in a hurry. We want to do a good job of it. Okay, we're putting the tea leaves in there. That's 4 grams, right? 4 grams. Shaking up the leaves, waking them up, smelling them, make sure she put the right thing in there. And then adding the dissipated steam water. Jifan?
Yeah.
And this is a 2-minute steeping. Okay. So all along here, we're talking about the finely crafted tea. And this is part of that. And you can tell when you look at the tea leaves, when they're in these tiny, delicate shapes. This is not, and uniform shapes, by the way. This clearly tells you this is Kung Fu Qimen Red. And that's the highest grade of Qimen Red that you can get. And they have lower grades, some grades which are actually machine harvesting. Not many, that's the very bottom. Because most of Qimen County, you can't really use machines. Farms are too small. The investment for farmers would be too much. The unevenness of the land, the unevenness of the varietals. Now, does that whole area that grows Qimen Red produce uniformly the same quality of tea? No. So there are particular areas, and the names won't mean anything to you. So I'm not going to burden you with a bunch of names of sub-counties where the terroir in those particular counties is particularly good. I'll tell you about the terroir though. The terroir is red yellow soil. The temperature averages around 60 degrees annually. Rainfall averages between 80 and 90 inches a year. So you get the really good conditions for growing tea. Yes.
So by red, yellow soil, you were saying clay presumably is the red soil and sandstone perhaps is the yellow soil, or is red, yellow soil how Chinese are referring to that landscape?
It's a great question. So the question is, you know, you haven't used enough scientific words yet. Give me the scientific word for red soil and yellow soil so I know precisely what you're talking about. Or should I just accept the fact that this red and yellow really refers to a color gradation and you're not going to give me the scientific term? I'm not going to give you the scientific term today. It's a color gradation. If you really want the scientific term, you write me this week and I will get it for you. All right, so look at the color of this thing. And you fruit this thing, you can stand 4 or 5 feet away and right away you're smelling these leaves. And then when you put your nose in it, it's like, oh my God. Now, I'm not going to tell you what you say after it. You're going to, you know, provide that narration. And so you're going to go through quality evaluation. We're entering the quality arena. 170 degree sip. We're going to cover the tongue. We're going to determine astringency and also aftertaste. So let's go ahead and do that. I get astringency on the midpoint of the tongue. Oh, I get a nice pleasant aftertaste from this. From an energetics, I'm already getting a little warmth. This might be okay. I'm gonna try another one.
This is such an interesting comparator with one of the reds. That would be not the smoked, but the
Omnipresent.
Omnipresent,
Yeah.
because it's such a omnipresent was so piercing.
Yes.
And it's positively piercing, but piercing in its qualities. And this feels full.
Yep.
And rich, but more gentle to me at least.
Love this description. Full and rich. There's no question. This has lots of body. And yet, I ask you this rhetorically. Is this body rough in your mouth? And the answer is no. It's mellow. It's smooth. It's appealing. This is a hallmark example of what fine, very fine Qimen Red can be. Catharsis.
Why the name Catharsis?
Because it brings you from whatever state you were in and evolves into this wonderful state of relaxation. It gives you that effect. And by the way, I'm answering, why is this name Catharsis?
Mhm.
All right. Your responsibility this week is the same as our responsibility. We're in week 3 of Japan. We're having a fabulous trip, seeing all sorts of interesting things, talking to interesting farmers and scientists. We have one more full week. So your responsibility this week is to stay healthy, drink plenty of tea, make sure you're distributing your drinking patterns over a number of teas so that you don't have a tea emergency. Because you have to hold out for about 10 more days. All right. It's always a pleasure having you. Cheers. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.